It was January the 15th, 2009. U.S. Airways Flight 1549 had just taken off from LaGuardia Airport in New York City when they flew through a flock of geese. Both engines immediately shut down. Captain Chelsea Sully Sullenberger realized there was no possibility of reaching any airport. And for the next 208 seconds, he calmly guided this powerless aircraft onto the icy waters of the Hudson River. Church, the landing itself was extraordinary. But what happened next revealed something even greater. As frightened passengers exited the plane and went out as the plane began to sink, they got out on the wings of the plane. Captain Sullenberger did not rush to save himself. Rather, he calmly walked down the aisle and then he walked back, stopping to look under every seat, every row. He made certain every passenger had escaped before he finally, as captain, stepped out himself. Only after protecting everyone else did he leave the aircraft. 155 people survived that day. His first instinct was not self-preservation. It was protection. This is what biblical agape love looks like. Love notices those who are vulnerable. Love becomes a place of safety for others. And Paul captures that truth in these three simple words. Love always protects. Have you ever noticed how some people, we're not all this way, but how some people have a natural instinct to protect others? I mean, I've noticed that throughout the years. When a child falls, they're the first one that's running to that child. When someone is being bullied, they're the first one who gets between the child who's the victim and the one who is bullying. When disaster strikes and people are running away, these people are running toward the problem. Something inside of them just says, someone needs me. Most of us can look back over our lives, can't we? And remember somebody in our life like that. Maybe it was a parent. Maybe it was a teacher. Maybe it was a coach. Maybe a soldier. Maybe just a close friend. A Captain Sully who stepped into a difficult moment in our lives and made us feel safe. Years later, we don't have a clue what they said at that moment, but we will never forget how they made us feel. Protected. You know, there's something deeply comforting about knowing somebody is standing guard over my life. That longing that you and I have, by the way, it is not accidental. God created us to experience that kind of love. And in fact, one of the clearest pictures of Christian love is found in these three words. Love always protects. That's exactly what Paul said when he wrote 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If you're just joining us for the first time today, we're in a study called The Most Excellent Way. We're looking at every aspect of love that he talks about. And in chapter 12, verse 31, Paul starts by saying this to the church at Corinth. And now I'm going to show you the most excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. Love always protects. You know what Paul doesn't say here? Paul doesn't say, sometimes love protects. Or he didn't say this, love protects when it's convenient. Love protects when it doesn't cost too much. Paul says, love always protects. Now, it's important that we know who in the world Paul is writing to. He's writing to the church at Corinth. Corinth is a city that was one of the most important in the Roman Empire. It really sat, just so you know, on this narrow strip of land connecting northern and southern Greece. Just for a minute, I want you to imagine New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Las Vegas all wrapped up into one. That's Corinth. Everything passed through Corinth. Merchants, sailors, government officials, athletes, travelers. Money passed through there. Ideas passed through there. Religions passed through there. Immorality passed through there. If you wanted to become wealthy, Corinth was the place to go. If you wanted to indulge your sinful desires, Corinth was the place to go. And in fact, the city had such a reputation throughout the Roman Empire, they came up with a new verb, to Corinthianize. It simply meant this. It meant you were immoral, you were reckless, you were self-indulgent. That was Corinth's reputation. Can you imagine planting a church there? And so in this church, things began to filter into this church. Instead of serving one another, the church was competing with each other. Instead of protecting each other, they were embarrassing each other. Instead of caring for each other, they were insisting on their own rights. The wealthy, for example, humiliated the poor at the Lord's Supper, at the Lord's table. Believers sued each other in public courts. Spiritual gifts in the church became a competition about who was the greatest. Everybody wanted to be noticed. Everybody in that church wanted to be important. Everybody wanted to be first. Does that sound familiar to our society today? Sometimes churches still struggle with society coming in with those very same things. And into that church, Paul writes one of the greatest chapters on love ever penned. He's saying, listen to me, Corinthians, you had the gifts, but you don't have love yet. Because spiritual maturity isn't measured by how gifted you are. It's measured by how you love people. When you look at this verse, it's very short, love always protects. We know the Greek word there is agape. What about the word for always? It's panta. Panta means this, every time, in every circumstance, without exception. And then the next word is really a fascinating word. It's the Greek word stego, and it means to cover, to shield, to protect, to preserve. It even referred to the roof of a house. You know, we had this incredible storm yesterday. Wow, that was quite a storm we had. And you think about that storm, you know, the roof doesn't stop the storm. The roof absorbs the storm. The rain beats against it. The wind pushes against it. Even sometimes the hail pounds against it. Yet everyone underneath remains safe. Why? Because something else took the impact. That's biblical love. Love absorbs what otherwise would fall on someone else. You who are parents, you understand this. How many of you have lost sleep at night so your kids could sleep peacefully? Firefighters understand this. They run into danger as everyone else is running out. Soldiers understand this. They're willing to stand in harm's way so back home we can live in peace. We're going to see that Jesus did exactly the same thing for us. He became our covering. That is exactly what Mike was mentioning this morning in the Lord's Supper. He absorbed the storm we deserve. Many of you know that I read this every day, Jesus Calling. Notice today, this is the very end of it, it says this: when your behavior is unfitting for one in my kingdom, do not try and throw off your royal righteous robe. Instead, throw off the unrighteous behavior. Then you'll be able to feel at ease in this glorious garment, enjoying the gift I fashioned for you before the foundation of the world. Jesus covers us because of his blood. And when God sees us, he sees the righteousness of Jesus. 2 Corinthians 5:21. I don't have it up here, but write that in your bulletin. 2 Corinthians 5:21. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So as we get ready to head out this morning, I want to give you this morning 3 points to take with you that talk about love always protects. 3 practical things we can take with us this morning. There should be a pen or a pencil in front of you. The bulletin you will receive, you open that up, you'll find the place to write these points. First of all, write this down if you would. Love protects people from danger. Love protects people from danger. Love always protects. I mean, it's obvious here, Paul is not talking about a feeling. He's talking about an action here. Love gets involved. Love steps in. Love refuses to stand on the sidelines while somebody else is hurting. One of the tragedies of our culture is that we have confused love with emotion. We say, I love you. Biblical love says this: how can I protect you? Sometimes that protection that we have in these relationships is physical. Sometimes it is emotional. Sometimes it is spiritual. Sometimes, and we know this for true, because maybe someone has protected you this way, sometimes it's protecting someone from making a decision that could alter the rest of their lives. Real love doesn't simply sympathize. Real love steps into the situation. You know, we see this in the Old Testament. The story of David and Jonathan. David is King Saul's nemesis in King Saul's mind, and only in his mind. Jonathan is King Saul's son. Jonathan loved David. And this love and protection he had for David, it is a great example for us here at the Shannon Oaks Church. As we said before in this pulpit, King Saul was just crazy jealous of David, who came back, and people were singing that David has slain his 10,000s and Saul his thousands. And when Saul determined he was now going to kill David, someone stands in the way. Someone stands in the gap. It's his son, Jonathan. Jonathan stood before his father, and he pleads for David's case. You have your Bibles, 1 Samuel 19:4. He says this: Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, "Let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you. What he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all of Israel, and you saw it, and you were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason? Now, Saul listened for just a short time, but Jonathan's love demanded even more, and Saul later warned Jonathan of this. As long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. And so Jonathan understood exactly what that meant. Eventually, Saul, in 1 Samuel 20:33, we don't have it on the screen, he's going to try and kill his own son, Jonathan. And when you get to verse 16, Jonathan is going to come and he's going to share this. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. He protected David's life. He protected David's future. He defended David before his father. He risked Saul's anger. Now listen to this. Jonathan obviously even risked the throne for himself. Why? Because love values people more than position. Can I ask you something this morning, just personally? I'm asking myself the same question. Would we risk our reputation to comfort someone? Would we risk our future to protect someone else's life? That's exactly what Jonathan did. Love protects people from danger. In World War I, it was just one of the most terrific sights in military history. Men dug in trenches, no man's land in between, people being shot. It is said every night you could hear the cries and the screams of men in no man's land crying out because they were dying or severely injured. But it was too risky to go out and try and get those men. They were called mercy dogs. They trained 10,000 of them. At night, these dogs, a pack of morphine and bandages was put on their back. And these dogs were trained to go into no man's land and stop when they found a wounded soldier. Can you imagine being that soldier? You're dying. You're all alone there. You're crying out. And this dog shows up. He lays across you. You reach up and you find the bandages. You find the morphine. And you find something else. This dog is not leaving until either you are saved or you die. He is staying with you. Of the 10,000 mercy dogs that served in World War I, 7,000 died in no man's land. Love for you and I enters no man's land. Love searches for wounded people. Love stays with the hurting. Love always protects. You may say, Jeff, what does that look like for us? We protect our children from influences that will damage their hearts. We protect a friend by having a difficult conversation they need to hear. We protect a marriage by refusing to flirt with temptation. We protect someone who's being criticized by speaking up when everybody else remains silent. Sometimes protection means saying no. Are we going to let a 2-year-old go in the street because we're afraid it'll hurt his feelings if we say no? Love steps in. Love says no. I'm protecting you. The beautiful thing is this. God has always been our protector. Psalm 91:4. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. I think a mother bird spreading her wings over her young while the storm rages is a beautiful picture here. I want you to think about this question. Has God done this in your life? Has there been countless times when we never realized he was protecting us? I mean, think about the doors that have been closed in your life. Think about the temptations that have been restrained. Think about the accidents that he's prevented. Prayers he answered. I think a lot of these things we're not going to know till we get to heaven. But I know this. There is a child who needs your encouragement. There is a spouse who needs your loyalty. There is a friend who needs you to be willing to tell them the truth. Someone is quietly drowning while everyone else in this room assumes they're fine. God has placed people in our lives. Perhaps God is calling us to protect them. Secondly, love protects people's dignity. Protection isn't only about keeping people safe. It's also about someone's dignity. I mean, one of the deepest wounds a person can experience is public shame. To be humiliated, to be embarrassed, to be laughed at, to be talked about. We've all felt it. Maybe somebody mocked you when you were growing up in school. Maybe someone has exposed your failures. Maybe someone has repeated something you shared in confidence. That's a killer. That's happened to me. Maybe someone used your worst moment as their favorite conversation. I mean, these wounds I'm talking about, and you know this is true, they last longer than physical wounds. Paul says, love always protects. Love refuses to expose people unnecessarily. It protects people's dignity. It guards their reputations. It covers their shame. It doesn't pretend that people don't sin. It doesn't protect sin. There's always going to be times when we must confront sin so that repentance may occur. That's what accountability is about. But there's a world of difference, church, between confronting someone to restore them and exposing someone to destroy them. Love never seeks restoration without true humility and love. It always seeks restoration and never humiliation. You know, I was thinking about the Bible. It's interesting. I mean, when you just open up the Bible in Genesis, what do we find? We find Adam and Eve have sinned. And immediately they realize they're naked. They hid. They covered themselves with fig leaves. And God comes looking for them. Can you imagine that scene? God comes looking for you. God comes looking for them. God confronts their sin. But he also does something remarkable. This is our God here. Look at this. The Lord made garments of skin for Adam and his wife, and he clothed them. Did you catch that? He covered them. Even in judgment, there was mercy. Even in discipline, there was compassion. From the very beginning, God revealed his heart. He doesn't delight in exposing people. He delights in redeeming people. One of the sickest things, I'm just so sick of this. Are you sick of this? Social media. A celebrity fails. A politician stumbles. An athlete makes a mistake. A pastor falls. And within minutes, millions of people know about it. We repost. We comment. We speculate. We laugh. Church, be careful of that. The heart enjoys what it celebrates. If we enjoy exposing people, there's something deeply wrong inside of us. God took the shame of Adam and Eve and he covered it. That's love. Love protects people's dignity. You remember a couple of weeks ago, I'll just mention this briefly again. In John chapter 8, how that woman caught in adultery had been brought before Jesus by those leaders. She'd been a trap. She'd been a pawn. She was being exposed. And what does Jesus do? He looks at those men and he says this in John 8:7. Let any one of you who's without sin be the first to throw a stone. And the stones start hitting the ground. The crowd disperses. Jesus looks at her and he says, woman, has no one condemned you? She says, no one. He says, and neither do I. Go and leave your life of sin. He didn't shame her. He restored her dignity. So I got to ask you something as a church. What kind of church are we? When someone fails, do we expose? Do we gossip? When someone confesses, do we expect whispers? When someone returns after making terrible decisions, do we cross our arms? This may be the most important thing I said in this whole message. If sinners here at Shannon Oaks don't feel safe admitting they need Jesus, then we've forgotten why we're here. This church ought to be the safest place in town for a broken person to find healing. Not because we're lowering God's standards, because we're reflecting God's heart. Truth and grace. I just want to say, this ought to be true of every life group here. Every life group here. And if you're not in a life group, I'd encourage you to get in a life group. You can check on your card. I want to know about life groups. Right now, we're establishing new leaders. Jose Monajano's in charge of our program. But life groups are a place for safety. Love protects people's dignity. And then write this down. Lastly, love always protects by standing between people and harm. We earlier said the Greek word means to cover, to shield, to provide protection. It paints the picture of one stepping between another person and danger. Love steps into the gap. The Bible's always taught that. In Psalm 82, 3-4, the psalmist writes this, defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. This is the questions we ought to ask as we leave today. Who needs someone right now to stand beside them? God, bring me to that person. Who needs someone to speak for them? God, bring me to that person. Who needs someone to believe in them? God, bring me to that person. Real love always looks toward the vulnerable. Love always protects. I'm going to read this really quickly. You can watch the video later on. You can write it down if you want. Just listen. This is just a few of the times Jesus did this. He protected children whom the disciples tried to send away. Mark chapter 10, 13-16. He defended the poor widow and gave 2 small coins while others overlooked her. Mark 12, 41-44. He touched lepers everyone else refused to touch. Mark 1, 40-42. He restored blind beggars and others who tried to silence him. Mark 10, 46-52. He welcomed tax collectors and sinners when everyone else rejected them. Luke 19, 1-10. He defended Mary of Bethany when others criticized her act of worship. John 12, 1-8. He honored the woman with the issue of blood after years of isolation. Mark 5, 25-34. He forgave Peter after his greatest failure, and he restored him to ministry. John 21, 15-19. He welcomed the thief on the cross, offering hope in his final moments. Luke 23, 39-43. And he cared for his own mother while hanging on the cross. John 19, 26-27. You know what I see Jesus doing here? He's always moving toward the forgotten, the broken, the ashamed, the fearful, the weak. Love always protects. 17 years ago this week, and I close with this, I stood in my first in-service training. I was about to be a middle school, 8th grade American history teacher. We had a speaker, and he was really good. But at the end, he told us this. During his speech, he had said he had been raised in a dysfunctional home. He himself was a retired teacher. But he said in this dysfunctional home, there was love never spoken. There was physical and sexual abuse. And he stood in front of 500 or more teachers here in Sulphur Springs, and he said this. He said, guys, I want you to know, I had this teacher who loved me, who encouraged me. And the best 45 minutes of every day was when I walked in her classroom. Because I felt loved and I felt protected. I walked away from that session about to go teach my first class a week later. And I made this commitment, and I kept it for 12 years. I will greet every student at the door with a smile and a fist bump, and my classroom will be one of love and protection. I may not have been the most brilliant teacher. I may not have known the most history, but there's one thing that I wanted. I wanted my kids to know that I loved them. That's what this church needs to be. That's what our life groups need to be. This needs to be a place where love always protects.